In this heartwarming story, a woman's letter of closure accidentally reaches the wrong address, landing in the hands of a lonely publishing CEO instead of her ex-fiancé. Their unexpected connection through words blossoms into something neither could have imagined. Join us for this tale of serendipity, healing, and second chances. And before we start this story, comment below from where you are watching us. The morning sun poured through the blinds of Camille River's small apartment as she sat at her kitchen table, a blank piece of stationery in front of her. At 27, Camille had spent the last year trying to forget the day her fiancé walked out on her, just 3 weeks before their wedding. Today was different. Today she would finally write him the letter she'd been composing in her head for months. Camille tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear and picked up her pen. Her hand trembled slightly as she began to write. "To the man who left without saying goodbye," she wrote, the words flowing easier than she expected. "I loved you hard and quiet, and you left me in silence. So this is me, answering the silence with peace." She paused, taking a deep breath. This wasn't a letter asking him to come back. It wasn't even a letter filled with anger. It was something she needed more: closure. "I'm not writing to make you feel guilty," Camille continued. "I'm writing to let you know that I'm finally letting go of the pain, of the questions, of the dreams we had together." As she wrote, memories flooded back. The day they met at her best friend's birthday party, their first date at that little Italian restaurant, the night he proposed under the stars at the city park, and then the morning she woke up to find his side of the bed empty and a brief note saying he couldn't do this anymore. Tears fell onto the paper, but Camille kept writing. "You taught me that love isn't always enough, but you also taught me that I'm stronger than I ever knew. I hope whatever you were looking for, you found it. I hope you're happy. I truly do, because I'm finally finding my way back to happy too." She signed it simply with her name, Camille. Her best friend Denise had been telling her for months to burn any letters she wrote to him. "Don't give him the satisfaction," she'd said. But this wasn't about him. It was about Camille finally closing this chapter of her life. She carefully folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. With shaking hands, she wrote his address, the one she'd memorized and couldn't seem to forget, no matter how hard she tried. "I'm proud of you," said Denise, who had been sitting quietly in the living room. She'd come over to provide moral support for what Camille had described as her final goodbye. "I just need to do this," Camille said, wiping away her tears. "Then I can truly move on." "Then let's mail it right now before you change your mind," Denise suggested, grabbing her car keys. Camille nodded, taking one last look at the envelope before they headed out the door. Across town, in a sleek high-rise building with a view of the entire city, Julian Maddox sat in his corner office, surrounded by glass walls in the cold comfort of success. At 32, Julian had built Maddox Publishing into one of the most innovative digital media companies in the country. What had started as a small online platform for writers had grown into a multi-million-dollar empire. His face had been on the cover of Business Weekly just last month with the headline, "The Man Who Revolutionized Publishing." But behind the success, behind the tailored suits and the confident smile he wore for photographers, Julian was empty. "Mr. Maddox, your 2 o'clock is waiting." His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Give me 5 minutes," he replied, turning to look out the window at the city below. 5 years. It had been 5 years since Caroline had left him at the altar. 5 years since she'd sold their private text messages to the tabloids, revealing his family's darkest secrets for the world to see. 5 years of building walls so high and so thick that no one could ever get close enough to hurt him again. Julian straightened his tie and walked out to meet his appointment, pushing down the familiar emptiness that threatened to swallow him whole. That evening, Camille stood in front of the blue mailbox on the corner of her street. The letter felt heavy in her hands, weighted with all the words she'd kept inside for so long. "Do you want me to do it?" Denise asked gently. "No," Camille replied. "I need to do this myself." She took a deep breath and dropped the letter into the mailbox. As it slipped from her fingers, she felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Part of her wanted to reach in and grab it back, but it was done. What Camille didn't realize, in her emotional haze, was that when she'd written the address, her usually careful handwriting had betrayed her. One digit in the address was wrong, a 7 instead of a 1, a simple mistake that would change everything. 3 days later, Julian arrived at his penthouse apartment after another late night at the office. His cleaning lady had left the mail on the marble counter, neatly stacked as always. He flipped through it absently. Bills, invitations to charity events he would send his regrets to, business magazines. Then he paused at a simple white envelope with handwritten address. No return address, just his name and address in an elegant, flowing script he didn't recognize. Curious, he opened it and began to read. To the man who left without saying goodbye. Julian frowned. This clearly wasn't meant for him, but as he continued reading, something in the words reached deep inside him. This letter, from someone named Camille, to a man who had broken her heart, spoke of pain he understood all too well, of betrayal, of learning to heal. I loved you hard and quiet, and you left me in silence. Those words hit him like a physical blow. How many nights had he sat alone in this enormous empty apartment, surrounded by silence? He read the letter 3 times, unable to put it down. Whoever this Camille was, she had managed to put into words exactly how he had felt 5 years ago. But unlike him, she had found a way to make peace with it. Julian walked to his home office and sat down at his desk. He pulled out a sheet of his personal stationery, paper he hadn't used in years. Before he could talk himself out of it, he began to write. I don't know who you are, but I needed every word you wrote. Not as an apology, but as a mirror, because somewhere along the way, I forgot how to feel anything except regret. He hesitated, then signed it simply, J.M. He didn't explain that the letter had been delivered to him by mistake. He didn't tell her who he was. He just responded to the raw honesty of her words with his own. Julian addressed the envelope to the return address on her letter, an address in a part of town he rarely visited. He would mail it tomorrow. For the first time in years, he felt something crack open inside him, something that had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten it was there. A week after mailing her letter, Camille was sorting through her mail when she found an unfamiliar envelope. The paper was thick and expensive, the kind used for formal invitations. Her address was written in a strong, masculine handwriting she didn't recognize. With a frown, she opened it and began to read. Her heart started pounding as she realized what she was holding. Someone had received her letter, but not her ex. Someone else had read her most private thoughts, her painful goodbye. I don't know who you are, but I needed every word you wrote. Camille sank onto her couch, her hands shaking. This wasn't possible. She had checked the address 3 times, hadn't she? She pulled out her address book and checked her ex's address, and there it was, the mistake, 1 wrong number. Her letter, meant to be her final goodbye, had reached a complete stranger instead, someone who had felt compelled to write back. Because somewhere along the way I forgot how to feel anything except regret. Those words stayed with her. Whoever J.M. was, he had connected with her pain in a way that felt strangely intimate. Camille should have been embarrassed. She should have thrown the letter away and tried to forget the whole thing. Instead, she found herself reaching for a clean sheet of paper. I didn't mean for you to read my goodbye, she wrote. It wasn't meant for you, but maybe it found exactly who needed it. She didn't add her name this time. No personal details, just words sent into the darkness, connecting with a stranger who somehow understood her pain. Across town, Julian was in the middle of a board meeting when his assistant slipped him a note. The magazine wants your final approval on the essay contest announcement. Julian nodded. The National Essay Contest had been his idea, a way to find new voices for his publishing platform. Anonymous submissions, no names, no backgrounds, just raw talent and honest words. What he didn't tell anyone was that he was searching for something, a voice that could break through the walls he'd built, words that could make him feel something again. He didn't know that he'd already found it, in a letter that was never meant for him. That evening, Julian returned home to find another envelope waiting for him, the same handwriting. He opened it quickly, surprised by how eager he felt. As he read Camille's new letter, a smile, a real smile, spread across his face for the first time in years. Without hesitation, he sat down to write back. Dear stranger, he began, maybe there are no accidents. Maybe your words found exactly who they were meant to find after all. And so it began. 2 broken hearts reaching out across the darkness. 2 strangers sharing pieces of themselves they'd never shared with anyone else, neither knowing how completely their lives were about to change. Camille sat at her desk at the small community college where she taught English composition. Her students were working on their final papers, and the room was quiet except for the clicking of keyboards and the occasional rustle of paper. Her mind, however, was far away. She was thinking about the latest letter from J.M., the 3rd one they'd exchanged. In it, he'd told her about his passion for words, for stories that connected people. He hadn't given personal details, no name, no job, no history, just thoughts and feelings that mirrored her own in surprising ways. "Ms. Rivers," one of her students interrupted her thoughts. "I was wondering if you'd seen the announcement for that national essay contest, the one by Maddox Publishing." Camille shook her head. "I haven't. What's it about?" "It's called Letters Never Sent. They're looking for personal essays in letter form, things people wanted to say but never did. The grand prize is huge, and the winner gets published in their magazine." Something about the contest resonated with Camille. Letters never sent. Wasn't that exactly what she'd been exchanging with her mysterious pen pal? "Thanks for letting me know," she told her student. "I'll look into it." That night, Camille researched the contest. Maddox Publishing was one of the biggest names in digital media, run by some reclusive genius CEO. The contest guidelines were simple: submit an anonymous letter, something honest, raw, and real. The kind of writing that could change someone's life. Without overthinking it, Camille opened her laptop and began to type. She started with the words she'd written in that first letter, the one that had found its way to JM by mistake. She expanded on it, pouring her heart onto the page. When she finished, she read it over once, then hit submit before she could change her mind. She had no way of knowing that on the other side of the city, Julian Maddox himself would be the one to read her words. No way of knowing that he would recognize them immediately. No way of knowing that her letter would change both their lives forever. All she knew was that for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally moving forward, away from the pain of the past, towards something new, something hopeful. And across town, Julian Maddox sat in his empty penthouse, holding her latest letter, feeling the same way. Julian Maddox sat in his spacious office, staring at the computer screen in front of him. For the past 3 weeks, his team had been sorting through thousands of submissions for the Letters Never Sent contest. As CEO, he normally wouldn't be involved in the initial selection process, but something had drawn him to personally review the entries that had made it to the final round. "Mr. Maddox, the board is waiting for you in the conference room," his assistant reminded him from the doorway. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes," Julian replied, not taking his eyes off the screen. He had just opened a new submission, and from the first line, something felt familiar, too familiar. "I loved you hard and quiet, and you left me in silence. So this is me answering the silence with peace." Julian's heart began to race. He knew those words. They were from the first letter, the one that had been mistakenly delivered to his address, the one from Camille. He quickly read through the rest of the submission. It was her letter, expanded and refined, but with the same raw honesty that had touched something deep inside him when he'd first read it. Julian glanced at the submission information. As per contest rules, it was anonymous, just an entry number and an email address that didn't include a name. Could it really be her, his mysterious pen pal, the woman whose letters had become the brightest part of his day? "Mr. Maddox," his assistant appeared again. "The board is getting impatient." Julian nodded and stood up, straightening his tie. "Tell them I'm on my way." But his mind was elsewhere, with a woman he'd never met, but felt he somehow knew better than anyone in his life. Camille finished reading her students' essays and packed up her bag. Another day of teaching done. She enjoyed her job at the community college, helping young people find their voice through writing. It was something her mother had encouraged her to do before she passed away 10 years ago. The thought of her mother brought a familiar ache. Helen Rivers had been Camille's rock, her best friend, her biggest supporter. When cancer took her away just as Camille was finishing high school, it had left a hole in her heart that had never fully healed. "You have a gift with words," her mother had told her once. "Don't keep them locked inside. The world needs to hear what you have to say." It had taken Camille years to find the courage to follow that advice. Even now, she sometimes struggled to speak up, to be heard, except in her writing, and, strangely enough, in her letters to JM. As she walked to her car, Camille checked her mailbox. There it was, another cream-colored envelope with that now familiar handwriting. Her heart skipped a beat as she tucked it into her bag. She would read it later when she was home, when she could savor every word. Driving home, Camille thought about how strange her life had become. For a month now, she'd been exchanging letters with a complete stranger, someone who didn't even know her name. Yet somehow, she felt more connected to JM than she had to anyone since her ex-fiancé. In his last letter, JM had told her about losing his parents, not to death, but to indifference. They were too busy building their social empire to notice their son, he'd written. "I learned early that being seen wasn't the same as being known." Those words had hit Camille hard. After her mother died, she'd felt invisible to the world. Her father had retreated into his work, barely acknowledging her existence. It was part of why she'd fallen so hard for her ex. He had seen her, or at least she'd thought he had. Once home, Camille made herself a cup of tea and curled up on her couch to read JM's newest letter. "Dear friend," it began, "I've been thinking about what you said in your last letter, about how the hardest part of being left wasn't the leaving itself, but the silence that followed, the questions that went unanswered. I understand that silence. 5 years ago, someone I thought I knew completely showed me I didn't know them at all. The person I trusted most betrayed me in ways I still can't fully talk about, and afterward, there was only silence. Not peace like you found, but a cold, empty space where trust used to be. Your letters are the first time in 5 years I've wanted to break that silence, to reach back across the void to another person. I don't know your name, I don't know your face, but I know your heart, and it's waking mine up again. JM." Tears filled Camille's eyes as she finished reading. Whoever JM was, he understood her in a way no one else had, not even her ex, who she'd thought was her soulmate. Without hesitation, she pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write back. At his office the next day, Julien called his contest director into his office. "This submission," he said, pointing to his computer screen where Camille's entry was displayed. "I want it to win." Rebecca Torres, who had been running Maddox Publishing's contests for 3 years, raised an eyebrow. "It's a strong entry, but there are others that—" "This is the one," Julien interrupted. "This is what we're looking for. Raw, honest, real. The kind of writing that changes people. The kind of writing that changed me," he thought but didn't say. Rebecca studied him carefully. In the 3 years she'd worked for him, she'd never seen Julien Maddox show this kind of emotion about anything. "All right," she said finally. "I'll let the judges know your preference, but Julien—" She hesitated, then continued. "Is there something personal about this entry?" Julian's face closed off immediately. "Just make it happen, Rebecca. And I want to meet the winner personally. A private dinner, not the usual public ceremony." Rebecca nodded and left, her curiosity only growing. Alone again, Julien opened his desk drawer and pulled out the small stack of letters he'd received from Camille. He'd kept everyone, reading them again and again. If the contest winner was indeed his anonymous pen pal, he was about to find out who she really was. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. Camille was grading papers at her desk when her phone dinged with an email notification. She glanced at it, then did a double take when she saw the sender, Maddox Publishing. With shaking hands, she opened the email. "Dear contestant," it read, "we are pleased to inform you that your submission to the Letters Never Sent contest has been selected as our grand prize winner." Camille couldn't believe it. She read the email 3 times to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Her letter, the one she'd written to her ex, the one that had accidentally found its way to JM, had won a national writing contest. The email went on to explain that instead of the usual public award ceremony, the CEO of Maddox Publishing had requested a private dinner to present the award. The date was set for the following Friday evening at the Azure, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Camille immediately called Denise. "I won," she exclaimed when her friend answered. "The contest, I actually won." "What contest?" Denise asked, confused. "Remember that essay contest I told you about? The one by Maddox Publishing? They picked my letter." "Your letter? You mean the one you wrote to—" "Yes. Well, a version of it. I expanded it a bit, but it's essentially the same letter that went to the wrong address. The one that mysterious JM guy got by mistake." "Yes, isn't it crazy? And get this, instead of a public ceremony, I'm having a private dinner with the CEO of the company." Denise whistled. "Fancy. I've heard that Julien Maddox is quite the catch. Good-looking, brilliant, and richer than sin, but also completely emotionally unavailable, according to the gossip columns." "I'm not interested in dating him," Camille laughed. "I just can't believe my writing is going to be published. My mum would have been so proud." After hanging up, Camille sat back in her chair, still processing the news. She should be thrilled, and she was. But something else was nagging at her. She wished she could share this moment with JM. Over the past month, he had become her confidant, the person she most wanted to share her thoughts with. She picked up a pen and began writing him a new letter. Julien received Camille's latest letter just as he was finalizing plans for the award dinner. His heart raced as he opened it, eager to see what she had written. "Dear JM," it began, "something amazing happened today. Something I want to share with you because somehow, even though we've never met, you've become the person I most want to tell my good news to. Remember I mentioned entering a writing contest I won. My letter, a version of that first one that found its way to you by mistake, was chosen. It's going to be published, and people are going to read my words. My mother always told me I had a gift with words. Before she died, she made me promise not to keep them locked inside. For years, I broke that promise. I was too afraid of not being heard, of speaking into silence. It took having my heart broken to finally find my voice. And it took your letters to make me brave enough to share that voice with the world. I'm meeting with the company's CEO on Friday to receive the award. I'm nervous and excited all at once. Wish me luck. Your friend. Julian read the letter twice, his mind racing. It was her. The contest winner was definitely his Camille. On Friday, he would finally meet the woman whose words had broken through his carefully constructed walls. But a sudden realization hit him. She had no idea who he was. She didn't know that JM and Julian Maddox were the same person. How would she react when she found out that her mysterious pen pal was also the CEO of Maddox Publishing? Would she think he had manipulated the contest results? Julian paced his office, unsure what to do. Should he tell her the truth before the dinner? Or let her discover it when they met? The day of the award dinner arrived. Camille stood in front of her closet, feeling overwhelmed. She'd never been to a place as fancy as the Azure. Her teacher's salary didn't exactly allow for a wardrobe filled with elegant dresses. "This one," said Denise, pulling out a simple black dress that Camille had worn to a colleague's wedding last year. "It's perfect, classic and elegant. And with these earrings and your mother's pearl necklace, you'll look amazing." As Camille got ready, her mind kept drifting to JM. She'd mailed him a letter yesterday, telling him about her dinner with the CEO of Maddox Publishing. Part of her wished JM could be there tonight, sharing in her moment of triumph. "Earth to Camille," Denise waved a hand in front of her face. "Where did you go just now?" Camille blushed. "I was thinking about JM. Denise shook her head. "You know, most people would think it's weird to be this attached to someone you've never met, someone whose real name you don't even know." "I know it's strange," Camille admitted, "but when I read his letters, I feel like I know him better than anyone I've ever actually met. It's like we can see each other's souls without all the usual distractions." "Well, tonight is about you and your amazing writing," Denise said firmly. "Not some mystery man who might be anyone. For all you know, JM could be a 70-year-old retired accountant." Camille laughed. "Somehow I don't think so, but you're right. Tonight is about my writing, about fulfilling the promise I made to my mom." Julian stood in front of the mirror in his penthouse, adjusting his tie. He had changed suits 3 times already, something his assistant would have found hilarious, given how little he usually cared about his appearance for business meetings. But this wasn't a business meeting. This was him meeting Camille, the woman whose words had somehow found their way past all his defenses. He still hadn't decided what to do. Should he tell her immediately who he was, or wait and see if she recognized him from the photos that occasionally appeared in business magazines? Either way, tonight would change everything. Their letters would no longer be anonymous exchanges between strangers. After tonight, they would be real people to each other with names and faces and histories. The thought both excited and terrified him. The Azure restaurant was even more elegant than Camille had imagined. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. A hostess in a sleek black dress greeted her at the entrance. "Ms. Rivers, Mr. Maddox is expecting you. Please follow me." Camille's heart pounded as she followed the hostess to a private dining room at the back of the restaurant. This was really happening. She was about to meet one of the most powerful men in publishing, a man who thought her writing deserved to be shared with the world. The hostess opened the door and gestured for Camille to enter. Standing by the window, his back to her as he looked out at the city lights, was a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit. "Mr. Maddox," the hostess announced, "your guest has arrived." He turned around slowly and Camille's world stopped. Those eyes. She knew those eyes, though she'd never seen them before. Somehow, impossibly, she knew them. "It's you," she whispered. Julian Maddox, JM, stood frozen, taking in the sight of her. The woman whose words had saved him from his self-imposed isolation. The woman who had unknowingly taught him how to feel again. "Camille," he said softly, her name on his lips for the first time. In that moment, standing across the room from each other, they both knew. The letters, the contest, the wrong address, none of it had been a mistake. It had been leading them here, to this moment, to each other. Camille couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. JM was Julian Maddox, Her mysterious pen pal was the CEO of Maddox Publishing. The man she'd been pouring her heart out to for weeks was the same man who had chosen her letter as the contest winner. "You knew," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you read my contest entry, you knew it was me." Julian nodded, taking a step toward her. "I recognized your words immediately. The same words that found their way to me by mistake, the words that changed everything for me." Camille shook her head, trying to process it all. "All this time, our letters. Did you plan this? The contest?" "No," Julian said quickly. "The contest was planned months ago. But when I saw your entry, when I realized it was you," he ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed strangely vulnerable for a man known for his unwavering control. "I had to meet you. I had to know who you were. So you made sure I won." It wasn't a question, but Julian answered anyway. "Your letter deserved to win. It was honest and raw and real. It touched something in me that I thought had died years ago." Camille didn't know what to feel. Part of her wanted to turn and walk out the door. This felt too much like manipulation, too much like being controlled. But another part, the part that had connected so deeply with JM's letters, wanted to stay, to understand. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "In your letters after you realized I'd entered the contest, why keep pretending?" Julian gestured to the table, set for two with fine china and crystal. "Please, sit. Let me explain." After a moment's hesitation, Camille moved to the table and sat down. Julian took the seat across from her. "I didn't know how to tell you," he admitted. "I was afraid you'd think exactly what you're thinking now, that I manipulated the situation, that I used my position to force a meeting. And maybe I did. But Camille," he leaned forward, his eyes intense, "your letters were the first real connection I've felt with another person in 5 years, since Caroline left me at the altar and sold our private messages to the tabloids." Camille's eyes widened. "That was you. I remember reading about that scandal. Your family's secrets." Julian nodded grimly. "After that, I decided never to trust anyone again. Especially not someone who knew who I was, what I had. But then your letter arrived. A letter never meant for me. And something in your words reached past all my defenses." A waiter appeared with champagne, but Julian waved him away. This moment was too important for interruptions. "I understand if you want to leave," Julian continued, "if you feel betrayed or manipulated. But before you decide, I want you to know one thing. Every word I wrote to you was true. Every feeling I shared was real. You don't know me as Julian Maddox, the CEO, but you do know me as JM, the man who found his way back to feeling because of your letters." Camille sat in silence, processing his words. The man across from her was both a stranger and the person she'd been sharing her deepest thoughts with for weeks. It was disorienting, confusing, but as she looked into his eyes, she saw something familiar, the same vulnerability, the same honesty she'd felt in his letters. "I need time," she finally said. "This is a lot to take in." Julian nodded. "Of course, but will you at least stay for dinner? As winner of the contest, if nothing else?" After a moment, Camille nodded. "I'll stay, but I have questions." "I'll answer all of them," Julian promised. "No more secrets." He signaled for the waiter to return, and as champagne was poured and menus presented, Camille found herself studying the man across from her. Julian Maddox, JM, was nothing like she had imagined, yet somehow exactly who she'd come to know through his letters. The night stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities neither had dared to imagine until now. Dinner with Julian Maddox was unlike anything Camille had ever experienced. The private dining room at the Azure offered a spectacular view of the city lights. The food was exquisite, served by waiters who appeared and disappeared with perfect timing. But Camille hardly noticed any of it. Her attention was fixed on the man sitting across from her, the man who had been her mysterious pen pal JM all along. "So," she said after their appetizers were served, "when exactly did you realize I was the one who entered the contest?" Julian took a sip of his wine before answering. "As soon as I read your submission, the words were unmistakable, the same ones from that first letter." He paused. "I've read it so many times I practically have it memorized." Camille felt a blush creep up her neck. "You've kept my letters." "Everyone," Julian admitted. "They're the most honest words anyone has shared with me in years." Something in his voice made Camille believe him. Despite her initial shock and suspicion, she couldn't deny the connection they'd formed through their letters. "Tell me about your company," she said, changing the subject. "How did you build Maddox Publishing?" Julian's eyes lit up as he described how he'd started with a simple online platform for writers to share their work. "I wanted to create a space where words mattered more than the name attached to them, where unknown voices could be heard alongside established ones. "Is that why the contest submissions were anonymous?" Camille asked. Julian nodded. "Exactly. I've always believed that true talent should stand on its own." As dinner progressed, they gradually relaxed with each other. Julian told her more about his childhood in a wealthy but emotionally cold family, about building his company from scratch rather than joining his father's investment firm, about Caroline's betrayal and the tabloid scandal that had left him unwilling to trust anyone. Camille shared her own story, losing her mother to cancer, her distant relationship with her father, her passion for teaching, and finally the pain of being abandoned by her fiancé just weeks before their wedding. "He never even gave me a real reason," she said quietly. "Just, I can't do this anymore." And he was gone. That's why I wrote that letter. I needed closure, even if I had to create it myself. Julian reached across the table and took her hand. The touch was electric, unexpected. "His loss," Julian said softly, "but my gain. If he hadn't left, if you hadn't written that letter, if you hadn't addressed it wrong." "A lot of coincidences," Camille said, but she didn't pull her hand away. "Or fate," Julian suggested with a small smile. When the evening finally came to an end, Julian walked Camille to her car. "Your letter will be published in next month's issue," he told her, "and the prize money will be transferred to your account tomorrow." "Thank you," Camille said. "Not just for that, for tonight. For explaining everything." Julian looked down at her, his expression serious. "I'd like to see you again, Camille, not as JM and not as the CEO of Maddox Publishing, just as me, Julian." Camille hesitated. Despite the connection they'd formed through their letters, despite the undeniable attraction she felt, she wasn't sure if she was ready to trust again. "I need some time," she said finally, "to think about everything." Disappointment flashed across Julian's face, but he nodded. "I understand. Take all the time you need." He handed her a small envelope. "One more letter. Read it when you get home." Camille took it, then surprised herself by rising on tiptoe to kiss his cheek. "Good night, Julian." "Good night, Camille." Later that night, curled up in her pajamas with a cup of tea, Camille opened Julian's letter. "Dear Camille," it began, "by now you know who I am. Not just JM, but Julian Maddox. I hope that knowing hasn't changed how you see the words we've shared. Tonight was both wonderful and strange, finally putting a face to the heart I've come to know through your letters. Seeing you walk into that room felt like a moment I've been waiting for my entire life, without knowing it. I understand your hesitation. Trust doesn't come easily after betrayal. We both know that too well, so I won't push, I won't rush. I'll give you the space and time you need. But I want you to know this. In a world where I stopped believing in second chances, your mistaken letter gave me one, and I'd like to see where it leads. When you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be here. Yours, Julian." Tears filled Camille's eyes as she finished reading. It was just like all his other letters. Honest, vulnerable, real. It was JM, but it was also Julian Maddox, CEO of a publishing empire, a man whose face occasionally appeared in business magazines, a man who lived in a world so different from her own. Could she really trust this connection they'd formed, or was she setting herself up for another heartbreak? The next morning, Denise arrived at Camille's apartment carrying coffee and pastries, eager to hear about the dinner. "Spill it," she demanded as soon as Camille opened the door. "What's he like? Is he as good-looking as the photos? Did he hit on you?" Camille took a deep breath. "Sit down. You're not going to believe this." Denise's eyes grew wider and wider as Camille explained who Julian Maddox really was, that he was her mysterious pen pal JM, that he'd received her letter by mistake, that he'd recognized her contest entry. "Holy crap," Denise whispered when Camille finished. "This is like something out of a movie. The reclusive billionaire and the teacher falling in love through anonymous letters?" "We're not in love," Camille protested. Denise raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because the way you talk about those letters says otherwise." Camille sighed. "It's complicated. I felt so connected to JM. But Julian Maddox? He lives in a completely different world." "But they're the same person," Denise pointed out. "The letters came from him, from his heart. Does it really matter what his bank account looks like?" "It's not about the money," Camille said. "It's about, I don't know. Can I really trust this? Trust him? What if I'm just seeing what I want to see?" Denise took a sip of her coffee. "There's only one way to find out." Across town, Julian sat in his office, unable to focus on the contracts in front of him. His mind kept drifting back to last night, to Camille's smile, to the way her eyes had lit up when she talked about her students, to the brief touch of her lips on his cheek. He'd given her space, told her to take her time. But it was killing him not knowing if she would call, if she would give them a chance. His assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Maddox, your 10 o'clock is here." Julian nodded, forcing himself back to the present. "Send them in." The meeting dragged on, with Julian only half listening as his marketing team presented plans for the next issue, the issue that would feature Camille's letter. "We'd like to do a feature on the contest winner," his marketing director was saying. "A profile piece to accompany the winning letter." Julian shook his head. "No, just publish the letter. No profile, no interview." "But sir, it would generate more interest if—" "I said no," Julian cut him off. "The letter stands on its own." After the meeting, Julian found himself staring out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there was Camille, reading his letter, deciding if what they had was worth pursuing. For the first time in years, Julian Maddox was not in control. And for the first time in years, he didn't mind. A week passed. Camille threw herself into her teaching, trying not to think about Julian or the letter sitting on her nightstand. She'd read it every night before bed, the words now as familiar as her own heartbeat. Her students noticed her distraction. "Miss Rivers, are you okay?" one of them asked after class. "You seem kind of somewhere else lately." Camille smiled. "I'm fine. Just thinking about some changes in my life." Changes. Was that what she wanted? To change her carefully reconstructed life by letting Julian Maddox into it. Every night she picked up her phone, scrolled to his number, which he'd included in his last letter, and then put it down again. What was holding her back? Fear of being hurt again, of being abandoned, or something deeper, fear that the connection they'd formed through letters couldn't survive in the real world. On Friday afternoon, as Camille was packing up her classroom, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Ms. Rivers, this is Rebecca Torres from Maddox Publishing. I'm calling about the profile piece we'd like to do to accompany your contest-winning letter." Camille frowned. "Profile piece? I wasn't told about that." "It's standard procedure for our contest winners," Rebecca explained. "Just a short interview, maybe a photo." Camille hesitated. "I'll need to think about it. Can I call you back?" After hanging up, Camille stood frozen in her classroom. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of, her private words, her private pain, becoming public property. And Julian had promised her the letter would stand on its own. Had that been a lie? Was this whole thing just a publicity stunt for his company? Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and dialed Julian's number. He answered on the first ring. "Camille." His voice was warm, surprised. "I was beginning to think you weren't going to call. Your company just contacted me about doing a profile piece," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "They want an interview, a photo. You promised me anonymity." There was a pause. "What? Who contacted you?" "Rebecca Torres. She said it was standard procedure." "It's not," Julian said, his voice hard now. "I specifically told them no profile, no interview. The letter stands alone. Let me handle this." "So you didn't know about it?" "Absolutely not," Julian assured her. "Camille, I would never break my promise to you, never." She believed him, she realized. Despite everything, she believed him. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions." "No, I'm glad you called. I've been thinking about you all week." Camille's heart skipped a beat. "I've been thinking about you, too." "Have dinner with me tomorrow night," Julian said. "Not at some fancy restaurant. At my place. I'll cook." "You cook?" Camille couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Julian laughed. "I'm a man of many talents, some of which I'd like to show you if you'll let me." Camille found herself smiling. "What time should I come over?" Julian's penthouse was exactly what Camille had expected. Sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking view of the city. What she hadn't expected was how comfortable it would feel. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with well-worn volumes. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and Julian, dressed in jeans and a casual button-down shirt, looked more relaxed than he had at the restaurant. "Welcome," he said, taking her coat. "Wine?" "Yes, please." Camille followed him to the kitchen, where something delicious was simmering on the stove. "It smells amazing in here." "My grandmother's pasta sauce," Julian explained, "the one family recipe worth keeping." As he poured the wine, Camille noticed a stack of papers on the counter. Her letters, she realized, each one carefully preserved. Julian caught her looking and seemed almost embarrassed. "I told you I kept them all." Camille touched the top letter gently. "It's strange to think that words I wrote to someone else found their way to you instead. Do you ever regret it?" Julian asked. "The mistake that sent your letter to me." Camille looked up at him, at this man who had been a stranger, then a confidant, And now, something more. No, she said softly. I don't regret it at all. Dinner was perfect. Simple but delicious. They talked for hours, moving from the dining table to the couch in front of the fireplace. Julian told her more about his childhood, about building his company, about his dreams for the future. Camille shared stories about her students, her writing, her hopes. It was like their letters come to life, the same openness, the same connection, but now with the added dimension of seeing each other's expressions, hearing each other's laughter. As the night grew late, Julian reached out and took her hand. I fired Rebecca Torres today, he said. Camille's eyes widened. What? Because of the profile thing? You didn't have to do that. Julian shook his head. It wasn't just that. She went behind my back, tried to manipulate you. I don't tolerate that kind of behavior in my company. His expression softened. Besides, I do a lot more to protect you, Camille. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Julian, I know it's fast, he said quickly. I know we've only just met in person, but I feel like I've known you for much longer. Through your letters, through your words. I feel the same way, Camille admitted. But it's still scary, trusting this. Trusting you. I understand scary, Julian said, moving closer. After Caroline, I thought I'd never trust anyone again, never let anyone close enough to hurt me. But then, your letter arrived, and something in me recognized something in you. He reached up to touch her cheek, two broken hearts finding each other in the darkness. Camille leaned into his touch. Is that what we are? Broken? Maybe, Julian murmured. Or maybe just waiting to be made whole again. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home, like all the words they'd written to each other had been leading to this moment. The next morning, Camille woke up in Julian's bed, sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, she felt disoriented. Then the memories of last night came flooding back. Their dinner, their conversation, their first kiss, and everything that followed. Julian wasn't beside her, but she could smell coffee brewing. Wrapping herself in his robe, she padded out to the kitchen. He was standing at the counter, reading the newspaper, 2 mugs of coffee ready. He looked up when she entered, a smile spreading across his face. Good morning, he said. Good morning. Camille accepted the coffee he offered, suddenly feeling shy. Thank you. Julian seemed to sense her uncertainty. No regrets? He asked softly. Camille shook her head. No regrets, just trying to catch up with how fast everything is happening. Julian nodded. I know, it's a lot. But Camille, he took her free hand. I've never felt this way about anyone, not even Caroline. What we have, it's real. It started with honesty, with both of us sharing our true selves. That's a foundation most relationships never have. Camille knew he was right. Their connection had begun with raw honesty. No pretense, no facades, just 2 hearts reaching out to each other. I want to see where this goes, she said. I want to try. Julian's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. That's all I'm asking for. A chance. He pulled her close, and as they stood there in the morning light, Camille felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Over the next few weeks, Camille and Julian's relationship deepened. They tried to keep it private. Julian was, after all, a high-profile businessman, and Camille valued her privacy. But word began to spread. The publication of Camille's letter in Maddox Publishing's magazine had made a splash. Critics and readers alike praised its raw honesty, its beautiful simplicity. And when people discovered that the anonymous author was dating Julian Maddox himself, the gossip columns went wild. Maddox's mystery woman, one headline read, publishing mogul falls for unknown writer. Camille tried to ignore it all, but it wasn't easy. Her students began asking questions. Her colleagues whispered when she walked by. Even her father, who rarely paid attention to her life, called to ask if the rumors were true. You're dating Julian Maddox? He'd asked, sounding more interested in her life than he had in years. The Julian Maddox? Yes, Dad, Camille had answered, not bothering to explain the whole story. We've been seeing each other for a few weeks. Well, well, her father had said. Maybe your writing is finally getting you somewhere. The comment stung, implying as it did that Julian was interested in her only because of her writing, or worse, that she was using him to advance her career. But Julian himself seemed unfazed by the attention. Let them talk, he said, when Camille showed him the latest gossip piece. We know the truth, that's all that matters. And the truth was that they were falling in love. Not with the idea of each other, not with some fantasy, but with the real person they were coming to know more deeply each day. Still, Camille couldn't shake a nagging worry. Julian's world was so different from hers. Fancy restaurants, exclusive events, private jets. She was a community college teacher who lived in a small apartment and bought her clothes on sale. Would the differences eventually matter? Would the novelty of her wear off? And would Julian return to dating women from his own social circle? She didn't voice these fears to Julian, but somehow he seemed to sense them anyway. One evening, as they were walking hand in hand through the park where they often met after her classes, Julian stopped beneath a large oak tree. "Camille," he said, his voice serious, "there's something I need to say." Her heart skipped a beat. Was this it? The beginning of the end? Instead, Julian took both her hands in his. "I love you," he said simply. "Not your writing, though it's beautiful. Not the idea of you, though it brought me back to life. I love you, the real you, the woman who grades papers until midnight, who cries at sad commercials, who can't cook to save her life." He smiled at that last one, and Camille couldn't help smiling back. "I love your strength," he continued, "your kindness, your honesty. I love the way you see the world, and the way you've taught me to see it too." Tears filled Camille's eyes. "Julian, you don't have to say it back," he said quickly. "I know it's only been a few weeks. I just needed you to know, to understand that this, us, is real to me, the most real thing in my life." Camille looked up at him, this man who had received her letter by mistake, this man who had written back, this man who had somehow become essential to her happiness. "I love you too," she whispered, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. Julian's face lit up with a joy so pure it took her breath away. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that felt like coming home. But even as she laughed in his arms, even as she felt happier than she had in years, a small voice in the back of Camille's mind whispered a warning. Nothing this perfect can last. Not for her. It was a voice born of experience, of heartbreak, of abandonment, a voice she'd been trying to silence ever since her mysterious pen pal had first written back to her. As Julian set her down and kissed her beneath the oak tree, Camille pushed the voice away and chose for now to believe in this unexpected love, this second chance she'd never asked for but had somehow been given, a love that had begun with a letter, never meant to reach him at all. 3 months had passed since Camille and Julian had confessed their love for each other in the park. 3 months of happiness that still sometimes felt too good to be true. Camille had gradually grown more comfortable in Julian's world, though she still maintained her own apartment and her teaching job at the community college. "My students keep asking for inside information about the famous Julian Maddox," she told him one evening as they sat on his balcony, watching the sunset. "They think I can get them publishing deals." Julian laughed, reaching over to take her hand. "And what do you tell them? That they should focus on their writing, not on connections?" Camille smiled. "Though I did mention your company's internship program to a couple of my more promising students." "Send me their applications directly," Julian said. "I'd love to read them." That was one of the things Camille loved most about him, his genuine passion for discovering new voices, new talent. It wasn't just business for him. It was a mission. The past 3 months hadn't been without challenges. The media attention had eventually died down, but there were still occasional photos of them in the gossip columns. Julian's social circle had been slow to accept Camille, with some viewing her as an opportunist or a passing fancy, and despite her growing confidence, Camille sometimes still felt out of place at the high-profile events Julian occasionally had to attend. But through it all, their connection had only grown stronger. They still wrote to each other sometimes, little notes left on pillows or tucked into books, words that were sometimes easier to write than to say aloud. "I've been thinking," Julian said, interrupting her thoughts. "What would you think about moving in with me?" "Not right away," he added quickly, seeing her surprised expression. "But soon, when you're ready." Camille's heart raced. It was a logical next step, and yet, "I don't know, Julian, it's a big step." "Too big?" he asked, a hint of hurt in his eyes. "No, not too big," she assured him. "Just, I need a little time to think about it." Julian nodded, squeezing her hand. "Of course. No pressure. I just want you to know that's what I want. To wake up next to you every morning, to build a life together." Camille leaned over to kiss him, pushing down the familiar fear that whispered in the back of her mind. The fear that said this happiness couldn't last. That eventually he would leave, just like her ex-fiancé, just like her father had emotionally abandoned her after her mother died. "I love you," she said, because that much she was certain of. "I love you too," Julian replied, his eyes reflecting the last golden rays of the setting sun, more than I ever thought possible. The next morning, Camille was at her desk at the college, preparing for her first class, when there was a knock at her office door. "Come in," she called, not looking up from her papers. "Hello, Camille?" That voice, she knew that voice. It had once been the voice she loved most in the world, the voice that had stopped speaking to her the day its owner walked out of her life without explanation. Slowly she raised her head. David, her ex-fiancé, stood in her doorway, looking almost exactly as she remembered him. Tall, handsome, with that charming smile that had once made her heart skip a beat. Now it just made her stomach tighten with anxiety. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. David stepped into her office, closing the door behind him. "I read your letter," he said, "in Maddox Publishing's magazine. I knew it was about me, about us." Camille shook her head, confused. "How did you know it was me?" "It was published anonymously." "The words," David said simply. "I recognized your way of writing. And then I saw the gossip pieces about Julian Maddox dating the unknown writer who won his contest." He shrugged. It wasn't hard to put together. Camille sat back in her chair, trying to process this unexpected visit. "That still doesn't explain why you're here. Now." After more than a year of silence, David had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Your letter, it made me realize what I lost, what I threw away." He moved closer to her desk. "I made a terrible mistake, Camille. Walking away from you was the worst decision of my life. A year ago, those words would have meant everything to her. Now they meant nothing. David, I'm with someone else now. I'm happy. With Julian Maddox." David's voice took on a harder edge. "Come on, Camille. What could you possibly have in common with someone like him? He's from a completely different world." "You don't know anything about him," Camille said firmly. "Or about us." David leaned forward, placing his hands on her desk. "I know you, Camille, better than anyone. I know that you're probably feeling overwhelmed by his lifestyle, his wealth. I know that deep down you're wondering when he'll get tired of you and move on to someone who fits better in his world." His words hit too close to her own secret fears, and Camille flinched. "I was wrong to leave," David continued, his voice softening. "I got scared, commitment-phobic, but I've changed. I've grown up, and I want another chance with you." Camille stood up, needing to put more distance between them. "You need to go, David. Whatever we had is over. It's been over for a long time." "Is it?" he challenged. "Or are you just trying to convince yourself of that?" "Camille, what we had was real. What you have with Maddox is a fantasy that's going to end as soon as the novelty wears off." "You don't know what you're talking about," Camille said, but her voice wavered slightly. David noticed and pressed his advantage. "Think about it, Camille, really think. We made sense together. We shared the same background, the same values. We had plans, a future mapped out." "Plans you threw away when you left me," Camille reminded him. "A mistake I'll regret for the rest of my life," David admitted. "But one I want to make right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I kept the ring. I never could bring myself to return it." Camille stared at the box in shock. "David, no. This isn't—" "Just think about it," he said, placing the box on her desk. "That's all I'm asking. Think about us, about the life we plan together, about the history we share." Before she could respond, the door to her office opened again, and one of her students poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Rivers, but your class is waiting." Camille nodded, grateful for the interruption. "I'll be right there." She turned back to David. "I have to go, and so do you." David nodded, picking up the ring box and slipping it back into his pocket. "I'll call you," he said. "We have more to talk about." As he left, Camille leaned against her desk, her legs suddenly weak. Seeing David again had brought back a flood of memories, both good and painful. But more than that, his words had tapped into her deepest insecurities about her relationship with Julian. Was David right? Was what she had with Julian just a fantasy that couldn't last? Across town, Julian was facing a crisis of his own. His brother, Alexander, whom he hadn't spoken to in years, had suddenly reappeared, demanding a meeting. "What do you want, Alex?" Julian asked coldly as they sat in his office. "Last I heard you were in Europe, spending Dad's money." Alexander Maddox leaned back in his chair, studying his younger brother. "I've been watching your company's success from afar." "Impressive, little brother, very impressive." "Cut to the chase," Julian said. "We both know you didn't come here to congratulate me." Alexander smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Always so direct. Fine. I've acquired a significant portion of your company's stock over the past few months, through various shell companies, of course." Julian felt his blood run cold. "What?" "I now own 23% of Maddox Publishing," Alexander continued smoothly. "And I've been talking to some of your other investors. They're concerned about the direction the company is taking under your leadership." What are you talking about? The company is more profitable than ever. Yes, but at what cost? Your obsession with discovering new voices is eating into the bottom line. Your investors want more focus on established authors, proven sellers. Less risk, more profit. Julian shook his head in disgust. That's not what Maddox Publishing stands for. We've always been about finding and nurturing new talent. Ah, yes, like your latest discovery. That teacher you're dating. The one who won your contest? Alexander's smile was cruel. Some of your board members are questioning whether personal feelings influenced that decision. Julian stood up, anger coursing through him. Get out. Now. Alexander remained seated. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence at the next board meeting. With the support I've gathered, there's a good chance I'll succeed in removing you as CEO. This is my company, Julian said through clenched teeth. I built it from nothing, and I'm about to take it away, Alexander replied, finally standing. Unless what? Unless you're willing to make a deal, change the company's direction, focus on profit over these idealistic notions of yours, and, he added with a smirk, end this embarrassing relationship with the teacher. It's bad for the company image. Julian stepped around his desk, coming face to face with his brother. Get out. Alexander shrugged. Think about it, Julian. You have until the board meeting next week to decide what matters more to you, your company or your girlfriend. After Alexander left, Julian called an emergency meeting with his legal team. The threat was real. His brother had indeed been quietly accumulating shares, and several board members had concerns about the company's direction. By the time evening came, Julian was exhausted. He hadn't been able to reach Camille all day. She was teaching, and then had a faculty meeting. All he wanted was to see her, to hold her, to remind himself of what really mattered. When his phone finally rang and he saw her name, a wave of relief washed over him. Camille, he answered, his voice warm despite his stress. I've been thinking about you all day. Julian. Her voice sounded strange, distant. Can we talk? In person. Something in her tone made his heart sink. Of course, where are you? At my apartment. Can you come over? I'll be there in 20 minutes. As he drove to her place, Julian tried to push away the worry gnawing at him. Something was wrong. He could hear it in her voice. Camille paced her small living room, her mind in turmoil. David's unexpected visit had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Not because she still had feelings for him, she didn't, but because his words had fed directly into her deepest fears about her relationship with Julian. When the doorbell rang, she took a deep breath before answering it. Julian stood there, looking tired but so handsome it made her heart ache. Hey, he said softly. Hey. She stepped back to let him in. Thanks for coming. He followed her into the living room, his eyes scanning her face. What's wrong, Camille? Did something happen? She sat down on the couch, motioning for him to join her. David came to see me today. Julian froze halfway to sitting. David? Your ex-fiancé? Camille nodded. He read my letter in your magazine and figured out I wrote it. He wants me back, Julian. Julian's face hardened as he sat down beside her. And what did you tell him? That I'm with you now? That I'm happy? She hesitated. But he said some things that got to me. About us. About how we come from different worlds. How eventually you'll get tired of me and move on to someone who fits better in your... Camille, that's ridiculous. I love you. You know that. I do know that, she said quietly. But love isn't always enough. Look at us, Julian. You're a CEO of a major publishing company. You live in a penthouse. You go to charity galas and business dinners. I'm a community college teacher who lives in a one-bedroom apartment and buys her clothes on sale. Julian took her hands in his. None of that matters to me, you know that. Maybe not now, Camille said, voicing her deepest fear. But what about in a year? 2 years? Will you still feel the same way when the novelty wears off? Is that what you think this is, a novelty? Hurt flashed in Julian's eyes. After everything we've shared? Camille felt tears threatening. No, I don't know. I'm scared, Julian. I'm scared that this is too good to be true, that it can't last. Julian was quiet for a moment, still holding her hands. I had a visitor today too, he finally said. My brother, Alexander. He's trying to take control of my company. He's been buying up shares, talking to board members. There's going to be a vote of no confidence next week. Camille's eyes widened. Julian, that's terrible. Why didn't you tell me right away? Because when I heard your voice on the phone, nothing else mattered. He squeezed her hands. Don't you see, Camille? The company I built, the empire everyone thinks defines me. I would give it all up tomorrow if I had to choose between it and you. You don't mean that, Camille whispered. I do, His voice was firm, his eyes steady on hers. "Before your letter found me, I was just going through the motions. Success, money, power, none of it meant anything. I was empty inside. Your words changed that. You changed that." Tears spilled down Camille's cheeks. "I'm so afraid of losing you," she admitted. "Of waking up one day and finding you gone, just like David, just like my father checked out after my mom died." "Camille, look at me." Julian gently lifted her chin. "I am not David. I am not your father. I'm the man who wrote back to a letter that was never meant for him. I'm the man who fell in love with your words before I ever saw your face. I'm the man who wants to spend the rest of his life proving to you that some loves do last." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, so similar to the one David had shown her earlier, and yet so different. "I've been carrying this around for weeks," Julian said softly, "waiting for the right moment. Maybe this isn't it. Maybe with everything that's happening, with your doubts and my company in jeopardy, this is the worst possible timing." He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "But I don't care about perfect timing. I just care about you, about us." Camille stared at the ring, her heart pounding. "I'm not asking you to give up your teaching or move into my penthouse tomorrow," Julian continued. "We can figure out all those details together. I'm just asking you to believe in us, to trust that what we have is real and lasting." He took the ring from the box and held it out to her. "Camille Rivers, will you marry me? Not because I'm Julian Maddox or because you're the writer who won my contest, but because we're two people who found each other in the most unexpected way and who are still brave enough to try again." Camille looked into his eyes, those eyes that had seen her soul through her words before they'd ever met, and in that moment, her fears seemed to melt away. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and promise of their future together. 1 week later, Julian stood before the board of Maddox Publishing, his brother Alexander smirking from his seat at the table. "I know why we're here," Julian began. "My brother has convinced some of you that I'm not fit to continue leading this company, that my vision is costing us profits, that my personal relationships are clouding my judgment." He looked around at the board members, men and women he'd worked with for years. "The truth is, Alexander is right about one thing. I do have a vision for this company that goes beyond maximizing short-term profits. I believe in finding new voices, in publishing words that matter, in taking risks on unknown writers who have something important to say." He paused, making eye contact with each board member. "That vision has grown our company by 300% in 5 years. It's won us industry awards and reader loyalty. And yes, it's the same vision that led to the Letters Never Sent contest, which discovered a writer whose work has resonated with readers across the country." Alexander stood up. "A writer you happen to be personally involved with. A clear conflict of interest." "Yes, I'm personally involved with Camille Rivers," Julian acknowledged. "In fact, we're engaged to be married." Murmurs spread around the table. "What my brother fails to mention," Julian continued, "is that I didn't know who she was when her entry was selected. Her words spoke for themselves, just as I've always believed they should." He placed a folder on the table. "Inside, you'll find a proposal. My vision for the next 5 years of Maddox Publishing. A vision that balances our commitment to new voices with strategic expansion into areas that will increase our profitability. Digital platforms, audio content, international markets." Alexander scoffed. "Pretty words, but the numbers are there too," Julian interrupted. "Projections, budgets, ROI analyses, everything you need to make an informed decision." He straightened his shoulders. "I built this company from nothing. I've poured my heart and soul into it. But I want to be clear about something. Maddox Publishing is not who I am. It's what I do. Who I am is a man who believes in the power of words to change lives. A man who found love through a letter that was never meant to reach him." Julian looked directly at his brother. "So go ahead. Take your vote. If you decide I'm not the right person to lead this company anymore, I'll step down. But I won't change who I am or what I believe in, and I certainly won't give up the woman I love." To Alexander's visible shock when the vote was tallied, Julian remained firmly in control of his company. His honest words, his clear vision, and perhaps most importantly his unwavering integrity, had won over even the most skeptical board members. As they filed out of the boardroom, one of the oldest members stopped to shake Julian's hand. "That woman must be something special," he said with a knowing smile. Julian nodded. "She is. Her words changed my life, and now she's changing our company too. The board member raised an eyebrow. "Oh, Camille's joining our outreach program," Julian explained, using her teaching experience to bring writing workshops to underprivileged communities, finding voices that might otherwise never be heard. "Sounds like you found a true partner," the man observed. Julian smiled. "In every way that matters." 2 months later, Camille sat at her desk in the small office Julian had set up for her in their new home, a compromise between his penthouse and her apartment, a house with a garden, in a quiet neighborhood between the city center and her college. She was reading through submissions for a new anthology she was editing, stories from the writing workshops she'd been conducting in community centers across the city, voices that might never have been heard without the platform Maddox Publishing was giving them. Julian appeared in the doorway, holding an envelope. "Special delivery," he said with a smile. Camille looked up, returning his smile. Every time she saw him, her heart still skipped a beat. "What's that?" "The first copy of the wedding invitation," he said, crossing the room to hand it to her. "What do you think?" Camille opened the envelope and pulled out a cream-colored card with elegant script, their names, the date, the location. It was perfect. "I love it," she said softly. Julian perched on the edge of her desk. "I have something else for you too." He handed her another envelope, this one simpler with just her name written on the front in his familiar handwriting. Camille's eyes met his. "A letter?" Julian nodded. "Some things are still easier to write than to say." As he left her to read it privately, Camille opened the envelope with careful fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "To the one I never meant to meet," it began, "but I thank the stars every day I did." Tears filled Camille's eyes as she continued reading. "1 year ago, a letter arrived in my mailbox by mistake. Words meant for someone else found their way to me instead, and in that seeming accident, my life changed forever. Your words broke through walls I'd spent years building. Your heart spoke to mine across the darkness, and when we finally met, I knew I'd found the person I was meant to spend my life with. In a few weeks, we'll stand before our friends and family and make promises to each other. But I wanted to make one more promise to you here in writing, where our story began. I promise to love you through every chapter of our lives together, through joy and sorrow, success and failure, certainty and doubt. I promise to be the man who deserves the trust you've given me, the man who sees you, hears you, cherishes you, always. You wrote a goodbye that became our beginning, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure our story never ends. All my love now and forever, Julian." At the bottom, he'd added a postscript. "P.S. Dinner tonight, not as fiancé planning a wedding, but as two people still falling in love, still brave enough to believe in forever." Camille clutched the letter to her heart, tears of joy streaming down her face. Then she picked up a pen and a sheet of paper from her desk. "Dear Julian," she began, "yes to dinner, yes to forever, yes to every day of loving you." And as she wrote, Camille knew with absolute certainty that the letter she had once addressed wrong had somehow found exactly the right destination after all. The end.